Om Shanti. Welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials, an interview that in this session we'll be exploring part 2 of purity. As always, we'll start with a short reflection. Sitting quietly, coming very gently inside into my own inner world, a unique and sacred space within my mind where there are not the usual thoughts, not the thoughts of day-to-day life, of different roles or responsibilities, tasks or time, but a space in my mind that's dedicated to sacred thoughts. I place my attention there and begin with very sacred thoughts about the self. Who I am beyond all the roles and responsibilities and even relationships. A timeless experience of myself, which is so connected to being very present in this moment, just being. And the experience I have of myself whilst just being present here now is like a drop of peace. No pulls on the mind. A precious moment of complete calm that feels like eternity. And asking myself, how many of these precious moments can I string together? One drop of peace, and the next second, another drop of peace. Creating a string of peaceful moments. Feels like recreating myself. Om Shanti. Om Shanti, and welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials. So tonight we continue with part 2, purity. So we discussed quite a bit last time about what purity is and what it's not.
We also discussed a lot about a sense of self. And one of the questions that actually came up was what is God's role in this? And why isn't it just not enough just to focus on myself, focus on soul consciousness?
Sometimes the image that comes into my mind is of a chalkboard and two possible scenarios. One is a completely clean chalkboard in which I draw a single tiny point, and that's it. And that's, the experience of the self. And then in that case, it would be enough to just consider myself to be a soul and I'm good to go. But in the second scenario, what I'm starting with isn't a completely clean chalkboard. I'm starting with a chalkboard that has many different scribbles and scratches and things drawn on it from the past. It's like a storm of images from past ideas, past beliefs, past communication, messaging, and in the middle of all of that, I put a single point. It's a very different experience. That point can get lost. And God's job is to erase everything but that single point, me. That being, because they are ever pure, there is the power of purity that can literally melt that which is temporary or false, impure, and just only the pure or the truth remains. So that's the job for God.
So, how do I do that when I'm walking and moving around?
Yeah, I had a really beautiful conversation with someone today, and we're talking about doing, and they were sharing that they've noticed their identity becomes we can sort of use the word impure in the sense that their identity gets very attached to temporary things, temporary roles, such as I am a corporate executive, I'm in oil and gas, and they get very caught up in the roles and the doingness. And they start to notice that as they get caught up, they actually speed up. So they might even be, the example they gave is brushing their teeth. And as they're thinking about what they have to do at work next day in that role, they're actually brushing frenetically. and and they had the wisdom to notice that and just say, chill, like let go of the, don't stop brushing your teeth, but internally chill. And so this wonderful blending, we call it pure action, where I am performing actions, but because my connection isn't with something temporary, but my connection is to something eternal or pure, it creates a power, a silence, that chill that enables me to perform the action without getting lost in the action. And what that actually does is enhances the quality of the action. The irony is, the less I focus on the action and more on the being rather than the doing, the better the doing gets. So I personally think everyone's quite adept at this. Everyone has the capacity to be forming an action and thinking about something else. They do it all the time. The thing is, we're not thinking about something that will elevate the action. We're thinking about things that make us more stressed. So we have to kind of be very careful about what we are thinking about as we perform actions.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of my sense of self and you're sharing God's role, many find that He's quite inaccessible that way.
Mm.
Maybe that's the thing. It's easy to think about all these things that really don't matter to me, but can't stop thinking about these things. So what do I do?
Yeah, it's interesting what Raj Yoga suggests is that God is not inaccessible, but that we are inaccessible. That the breakdown in the connection isn't actually with respect to me and God. The breakdown is actually with respect to me and myself. That the moment that I can get that connection, that I connect with myself properly, because of the natural reframing that happens, a connection, a real, authentic connection to God is much more natural and easy. What's happened though is that we have deep habits of connecting to God as bodily beings, and whatever baggage that has brought with it, and that will keep interfering. So I need to trust that yes, God exists, and yes, that being is a soul, not a bodily being. But for that connection to work, I actually need to focus on getting the connection with myself aligned first. And, the easiest example we can think of is this idea of someone who has, say, been adopted, and they're actually unaware that they've been adopted. So they think the adopted parents are their birth parents, and that relationship and depth of belonging very much shapes them. And then someone comes along with very official documents and says, no, those aren't your birth parents, those are your adopted parents, here's your birth parents. And the problem is, of course, that they identify themselves a certain way. So the moment I start to shift my sense of identity, it becomes easier to reframe and the relationships will change.
So about things being easier, and because this aspect of purity is a huge part of Raja Yoga, is there certain things I can do, pay attention to in my own personal life that could really optimize my awareness of myself, optimize, this chilling, this experience with
Mm.
others seems to be a lot that maybe I could alter or start to reflect on that I can help myself in.
What we've noticed actually is timing is everything. So the example I gave of the soul who knows this, they actually are going through a crisis. So the timing, no one is going to do this if it's not the time for them. So I know that's not a very useful answer, but unfortunately, it is. The reality of it is that souls are motivated to do it because change frightens us so much that we pretty much have to have our back against the wall to even consider it. So timing is huge. That, if someone starts to notice that there's a restlessness inside, a disinterest, things that used to really be satisfying, fulfilling, it's not really working anymore. So looking for more, if you will, meaning or purpose. These are sort of signals that I am becoming ready to explore this realm of spirituality or purity. That's really important. And then, if that's the case, because purity has such a deep connection to truth, I think it's almost like cleaning a space before a visitor comes. I need to clean my inner space so that new ideas can visit. Really important to expose the self to spiritual knowledge, even though it may not feel like I'm totally understanding it, but it's literally cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. That's huge. Is just keep exposing the self to spiritual knowledge, and of course, developing a practice. I know we touched on that last week. Practices that support developing this relationship with purity, with spirituality, and with God. There's certain lifestyle practices we can adopt that will really, really support this.
Mhm. One of the things that actually came up during the reflection prior to us having a discussion, it was
Mm-hmm.
just feeling real.
Mm.
And it's such a beautiful feeling. And you're just like, oh, I just want to do this all the time.
Mm.
But then there's this thing called internal resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how does one deal with that, especially when there's such meaningful moments, just to be in that quietness?
Sometimes I think it's just so helpful to know, to simply know resistance will come. Some people think it's very dark to tell someone that ahead of time, but if I go to a doctor and they say, you need to take this medication to heal, and then they add, and by the way, 3 weeks in, you might start to have this particular side effect just for a period of time, but keep taking the medication. That's completely normal. It's not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. It's completely normal and it will pass. I would be so upset if the doctor didn't tell me that. Can you imagine? I would stop taking the medication because I don't think it's working. So I think it's really kind of fair to share that spiritually as well, that we're embarking on a change. The status quo will fight back. This is what it's going to look like. You're not doing anything wrong. I know the other day, Soul shared. I'm starting to have these crazy thoughts, and all I can say is you're right on course. Like, yes, that's going to happen. It happens in anything else. If I have deep habits of doing one thing and I'm trying to develop a different way of doing it, of course the habits are going to fight back. But I need to know, yes, that's going to happen. It's just common sense. It doesn't mean I stop. I realize it's going to happen. And in fact, knowing it's going to happen makes me more powerful. So it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Back to that first thing about timing, if I'm really determined, this is what I want to do, it's incredible that you'll be able to overcome that resistance through just sheer. Sometimes the word spirit is used interchangeably with will.
Mm-hmm.
Just this is what I want to do. So we shift desire to pure desire. This is what I have to do.
For yourself in these years of being in this study, um, what have you found your experience has been like to stay on track when this internal resistance comes? Because I believe even for all of us who have been studying, um, it, the internal resistance can really emerge like your Achilles heel.
Hmm.
Like that. Well, for those
Yeah.
who don't know what that phrase means, Achilles heel is like your weakest link within yourself, and those are the challenges, the most
Yeah.
challenging ones.
One of the first answers coming to mind is again the daily disciplines.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, this works in any, whether it's spiritual, emotional, mental, physical, any program of transformation. It's so beneficial, so kind to the self to have a structure. Um, even before this, I was, should I go take a fitness class? It's like, you go take the fitness class. You do, there's so much that the mind will play games. So it's really important to have a structure, that a routine of some sort, because there's going to be days where you feel sort of flat. And it's so supportive, even though you're feeling flat, maybe that it's like, but no, I get up, I have this moment of reflection, I have a moment of spiritual study. It carries you through those moments. It's so important. It's funny, there's a saying that what the enemy likes to do is to separate and isolate. And very often when the resistance to change is attacking, if you will, what it does is likes to separate you from anything that's beneficial, anything that will help you to move forward. It will separate you and it will convince you that it's okay. You know, take it easy. It's all right. it will have wonderful rationalizations. It's quite remarkable to look at how our psyche works. And so it's really important to have a daily routine in place.
Now, in terms of, I know we mentioned last week in the last session, we seem to have a, I know the words are strong, but a hate love relationship with purity. And with this
Mm,
internal resistance that comes
mm,
up, and it's you know, it's really useful to hear that the daily structure is really important. How would I know if I'm really able to honor myself in those times when the internal resistance is strong?
yeah. Sometimes I think it's useful to maybe add in the word dignity with purity. I think it will clarify that love-hate relationship. We're talking about the dignity or the royalty of the self. And a very similar question came up in a different context, and it really touched me. And the soul was asking, how do I know if I am moving forward as an act of self-care, or I'm just moving forward and it's rather destructive, like I'm just sort of abusive or punitive? How do I, it can look the same. How do I, and in one case, and I know I heard a bit of it in the experience, in one case ego is driving me, and in the other case self-respect is driving me. The exact same activity. Purity is self-respect. And so it's amazing when a soul has self-respect, they can be extremely disciplined, extremely clear and firm with themselves, but it's experienced as so much love. But if it's ego driving, then it's quite punitive. So when the resistance comes, the first thing I want to do before I do anything else is get into that position of, personal dignity or self respect. We talk about soul consciousness, to connect to the self. And this is where God is extremely useful as well. But to connect this to the self in such a royal, valuable way. Soul consciousness is to say that I am values, right? That's what we're saying, is I am values. So to really go to have a practice of deeply experiencing that, because that state is going to help me override the resistance in a really benevolent way rather than a punitive way.
Sounds like a couple of things. Timing is a part of it,
Mm.
so that's not ego that's driving me. But one of the other things is, what kind of feelings have you felt to know that you're on the right track? That this is what I'm feeling is it's real self-respect. It's soul consciousness, and it's not ego-driven.
When we have, the word real, which is also connected to purity, this real self-respect, it when it's ego is extremely reactive, extremely emotional, and extremely melodramatic. It tends to be quite bristly. So all of the opposite is self-respect. Self-respect's very mature. It's not reactive. It's not melodramatic and emotional. It's got this depth to it, this sense of depth or deep roots, this real sense of maturity to it. And in that maturity, we kind of conduct ourselves we manage ourselves in a different way. So, these are kind of, in physical fitness, we talk about body awareness, that one starts to be able to feel subtle muscles when they activate what that's like. We kind of have to develop that skill spiritually, these subtleties of when I'm in a real, authentic, mature place, and when I'm in an immature, the ego is driving. I need to know what that feels like, and ideally how to move myself between the two.
Perhaps it's connected to my next question. Then I know you were sharing about there are certain things in my lifestyle that could really
Mm.
optimize. And then you were sharing about timing. Would one be able to just gain a sensitivity to what would be optimal, I suppose you can say, in terms of certain things in my life that may need to be adjusted?
Mm. When we look at the the study of Raj Yoga and the history of the students with it, this is where the question starts to get a little interesting. So let's take a very neutral example. Let's say that I am a dancer and I want to become the best possible dancer I can. So I'm obviously going to seek out a teacher that really knows what they're doing and will give me good training. And when I find them and I'm convinced that they are an authority in the study of dance, so let's say it's Mikhail Baryshnikov, who's going to teach me, I will do whatever they say because I can tell that they know what they're doing. There's an authority there. When we look at the students of Raj Yoga, those original students, and I say original because we get to see the decades of their study, so we have the proof that it works just by how they conduct themselves. One thing that was very firm in their mind in terms of the disciplines, the practices, the direction, they really felt in their heart that the authority on happiness, on spirituality, the authority on transformation, the authority on purity was teaching them, giving them guidance. They felt it was God. And so they completely surrendered. We always surrender to whatever we feel is an authority with respect to our objective. So even if other thoughts come, other pieces of advice come, but if I feel no, this is the authority telling me this is what I need to do to reach that objective. And if I find I believe, I trust the direction, but I'm having difficulty getting online with it, then I absolutely need to stop and check inside and see what's going on inside, knowing how active those resistance forces will be. I just need to constantly be very honest in how I'm moving along.
Sounds like this last point you were sharing feels like I know it, but I don't seem to have the power. And if I don't
Mm,
stop and check,
mm,
then I don't have the right, clear momentum. Possibly, maybe ego is trying to drive things.
mm-hmm. It's constantly, it's just a constant journey of honesty, which is also a form of purity. A constantly being so clear and honest, like keeping, we're so good at looking at others and kind of taking them apart and figuring out what they're doing and critiquing others. And it's not that we want to critique ourselves, but we have a capacity to be quite observant. We're just directing it to the wrong place.
Way.
We need to kind of, with again that self respect and deep understanding or compassion, look at myself and see exactly what's going on, what's driving me, what forces are working inside of me, like incredible honesty with the self, which is such a beautiful skill to have for anything. So it's worthwhile, but definitely needed in a journey of self transformation.
It's interesting, this aspect of purity, because we have this hate love relationship with it. When I really go into the depths of soul consciousness, have you felt that the sensitivity to what purity is changes? Because purity is really a conversation of standards, and we also have some mixed ideas, which seems to be connected to why we look at others. And even if, let's say, we looked at ourselves, we get quite punitive with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are depths of purity. And our relationship with it might be as simple as we lost our purity and we feel a little disappointed in ourselves about that, and to face that loss of it in the self in an understanding and constructive way, so that I'm not afraid to begin on the journey of reclaiming it. It really, I think, makes us feel unworthy. And so, so we don't want to face the issue at all. So to have a sort of reconcile or, be at peace with my journey away from purity, oddly enough, so that I can begin the journey back to not feel bad. Because we do, I mean, if I said to someone, would you like me to interact with you with pure intentions or impure intentions? Of course, we want people to interact with pure intentions. We love purity in terms of ourselves. Um, and what does pure mean? Again, really simple, that nothing foreign is mixed in. This is why it's connected to real. When I am my real self, real, again, the idea with Raj Yoga is those intrinsically good. The original state is intrinsically good. So my real self, which is that original self, intrinsically good, peaceful, loveful, truthful, blissful, powerful. We feel real when we feel peaceful. And peaceful not because I see a beautiful scene outside, not as a reaction to anything outside, but just my nature of peace. At that moment, I feel real. So that's purity, is that I am in that original state. So it's really nothing to feel bad about. It's actually quite attractive. So I think sometimes we come to Raja with many different ideas, a lot of baggage, and it's nice to take a moment to sort that out. Be very clear with the self, and constantly, yes, it keeps changing. I'm constantly sorting that out, constantly seeing, oh, I didn't know I was carrying that belief with me. I didn't even know it was there, but seeing how it's interfering.
Mm-hmm. It's so interesting. When you're sharing that, I was thinking again about timing, then,
Mm.
even a sense of, hmm, maybe doing it this way is really not really helpful to myself. So, the sensitivity to purity, have you found that it's been constantly growing? Do you ever feel like you ever hit plateaus?
Yeah, I think it could be a bit like traveling up a mountain in a way. You get bursts of energy where you move. And then sometimes I think you need a little bit of a moment to recover. I don't think it ever appears that way, but that might be what's going on. You feel like you're just kind of not really going anywhere. And again, it's so important to have the daily routine, so that even at that moment, you're still moving, if you will, or protecting yourself, your efforts. But it's learning, because in Raja, you're learning to become pure, is such a fascinating. Think about all the different things that we're learning. We learn skills so we can do our job at work. We learn languages with it. Out of all, like, what is valuable for us to learn? What is valuable? Learning self-respect, learning dignity. Is that valuable to learn? And the idea that we can learn that. And in any journey of learning, there are moments when I'm completely confused, or there's moments when I make a mistake, or it's just constant learning, and that definitely happens in the study.
You hit the nail on the head when you were talking about purity and worth. And it feels like maybe we're not really aware that any sense of lack of value in myself really affects just my journey.
Yeah. And always ego's very excited to jump in and give us a false sense of worth at any time. So we're a bit distracted again from seeing things as they are. But this is really a return. I think of God often as the value maker. And the irony that the first student of the organization was a jewel merchant, I don't think that was a mistake. Um, this idea of being able to see in a gem, raw material, the value there, and then to go through this process of refining it so that this beautiful diamond that has always been there emerges. It's quite a lovely metaphor for what's actually happening in Raj Yoga, which is to emerge the value of the human spirit. That's really all that's going on. That's all that purity is. It's actually very exciting if I can understand and have the right attitude about it. Um, but to remove those defects from the jewel, it gets very, very interesting. But it really is. So I need to take the time to constantly fortify that sense of self-worth so I can continue to move forward in becoming worthy. I know it sounds strange, but we say you need purity to become pure.
It's interesting because that came up during the experience.
Mm.
Came up too, or at least I felt it during just the reflection at the beginning of the session. It's so invisible,
Yeah.
but it's so important to do that. That's where perhaps maybe a lot of the internal resistance is take the time to actually cultivate that which is meaningful, but you've got nothing to show for it with respect to ego.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a valuable skill, and it's what I was doing during experience. Such a valuable skill to be able to know when to stop and just maybe reset.
Mm.
Um, in fitness, there is for those who want to do things in a healthy way, some just ego is hammering at them, so they just want to rack up quantity. But those who want to quality experience, so they get full benefit, before they add movement, they always set their foundation. It's like a basic rule in movement mechanics is set your foundation, make sure you've got the alignment before you add movement. It just doesn't make any sense to start to do things if you're out of alignment. It's just a recipe for disaster. So you always set your foundation and then you add movement. And it's such a great skill to have spiritually, to constantly have the habit of checking in and saying, am I in that right alignment? Am I connected to myself? Do I have a pure relationship with a loving, a respectful relationship with myself? Am I moving? Am I studying in that alignment? Because ego will, again, very enthusiastic, keep jumping in.
Let me at it. Let me at it.
To do the study for me, because then it won't die. It won't, it will stay alive. So I'm constantly checking in, and it takes. I heard you use the word courage. It takes courage in the sense of to not, succumb to the allure of outcomes or show or the overt, if you will. And so I always enjoy it whenever in the study it is underlined that everything is incognito. Someone can look like a lot's going on. Someone can give great lectures or have the right number of pleats in their sari or whatever. It doesn't necessarily mean that self-respect, that purity is there. So really have to go inside, and it's probably the most beautiful part of the relationship with God is being able to have this very intimate, almost conversation with that being. There's no words or language, but in silence, letting that soul help me to achieve that pure alignment, that that sort of space of self-respect. This is something, it's like God's a chiropractor for the soul. He is so good at adjusting, helping the soul to get into that alignment of self-respect.
I know time's flying. Perhaps maybe one more question. Have you found through the years it becomes easier to just check in? And I know you're using that example of fitness, to take the time to reset. And there are many who could just go at it for quantity. feels like it takes power to be able to not do that.
Yeah, in fitness, there's two funny things that happen as you move along. Yes, you are becoming more powerful, and yes, you are developing a facility. So that's great. But the other thing is that the challenges are becoming greater. So now I'm lifting a heavier weight. So, yes, if I went back to the old weight, wow, I'd just be throwing it around. But now I'm lifting a heavier weight. So now I feel like, am I moving forward at all? Gosh, it feels like I'm out of shape again. I'm having so much. So they say, that that as you become more powerful, the resistance becomes more powerful too. So yes, your facility, you become very adept at managing yourself, of developing these very incognito skills, but you always have to pay attention. You always, because the resistance is morphing all the time. So
Not to
I'm
scare
constantly,
everyone.
no, it's okay, because the bottom line, Rajaga says, truth will prevail. You will be successful. You will be. There's no if. You will be successful. But some very interesting things happen along the way, and they have to, because that's how I accumulate wisdom, wealth, inner wealth. I develop so much experience through meeting these various challenges, but we absolutely will be successful. Truth will prevail. So you're constantly having to pay attention, constantly having to learn. I just remember Daddy Genki, who left the body, passed away in March, 103 and or 4. I'm never quite sure. I don't know if anyone knows. Um, but you just, till her last breath, you just felt she was learning. She was just, 80 plus years studying Raj Yoga, and still the feeling of learning. And there's just no end to the wisdom and experience that one, and the power and worthiness that one can accumulate in this study. So always learning. But there has to be that deep faith. That has to be constant, that I will be successful. I will be victorious in this.
Mhm. Well, thank you, Judy. We could go on and on. It's such a powerful topic, but I
Mm.
believe we need to close this session. But purity is a topic that's always integrated into all of our sessions. So stay tuned. So perhaps we'll have a wee little reflection.
Perhaps one of the most widespread forms of losing our purity is that we've developed a very ordinary consciousness about ourselves. We see ourselves in very ordinary ways, often seeking out, almost begging from the outside world to receive an experience of being special, compliments, recognition. And yet, on the other hand, we know that life is so precious, really sacred. And this experience, this pure experience towards the self, of realizing how precious I am as life, as the living being, the soul, more precious than all the diamonds put together in the world. There is nothing more valuable than life itself. And how much do I go through the day with that awareness? I am the living being. I am life itself. The honor, the royalty, the respect of remembering at a very basic level who and what I am. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Well, thank you, Judy. If souls caught the practicality, well, at least I caught that in terms of the subtlety of making it, ensuring it's meaningful,
Yeah.
even though it's invisible.
I've always loved that. Shakespeare, to thine own self be true, really always touched me. So, this is all we're trying to do in Raj Yoga. This is purity.
Well, thank you, Judy, and thank you for those joining. Perhaps I'll pass it back to you to let us know about upcoming sessions.
Special weekend coming up because there's World Meditation Hour on October 18th. So I know that in the earlier session, Nora reminded us that there are some Raj Yoga courses coming up this weekend or starting. They will cover 2 weekends. So there is one in Gujarati that will be online, and there is some spots available for on-site as well. So that's this Saturday and Sunday, next Saturday and Sunday. And there's also going to be the course in English called the Raj Yoga Experience this Saturday and Sunday and next Saturday and Sunday. So all those details are on our website. We still have Inner Fitness 2 to 3 on Saturdays, and it is Focus this coming Saturday. And then, of course, Sunday, 6:30 to 7:30, the Insperience will be dedicated to World Meditation Hour. So a chance to really have pure experiences of the self, and the world will definitely benefit through that kind of interactivity. So you're welcome to join us, and we always welcome your comments. You can email us if there's a topic you want to revisit or explore a little more deeply. Let us know, and we're happy to do. Thank you for joining us. Until we meet again, Om Shanti.